When I was going down the road, like a lot of people do, of figuring out what we are, what defines us. Are we our body, or are we something much greater? Are we something on a spiritual conscious level that is actually defining our existence? And is that gap what is really holding so many people back? Digging in and looking into what consciousness really was and getting into these occult ancient writings and all these cultures that go back that talk all about the importance of seeking higher consciousness and all these things, I started to realize, and the reason I wrote the book, The Illusion of Us, The Suppression and Evolution of Human Consciousness, is because I really came to shockingly discover not only was consciousness not known very well across the world, especially these days, but it was actually being purposely suppressed so people didn't wake up. That it's a kind of a common term that's considered when someone actually realizes who they really are beyond their physical body, and then of course that leads down the whole rabbit hole of trying to understand the fundamentals of the universe itself. There's a whole other side of it, this collective consciousness, this higher consciousness that you merge and become part of. And I think a lot of people who listen to their consciousness and intuition and start reaching those higher states, they discover that there's almost a higher speaking voice to them, this Akashic record that's speaking to those higher conscious people. Because I believe once you do start raising your consciousness, you join this higher conscious state that is more of a collective that in some ways seems to be fabric around our universe itself, this conscious living universe. When someone hears that things are, that bad word, right, conspiracy, or suppression of history, or suppression of information, it makes a lot of people really uncomfortable because we all have this predetermined view of reality. Most of the time it's kind of a collectively shared reality where people think this is this way and this is this way, and everybody gets on the same page and everything is great. Everyone's kind of going through life and no one's asking any questions. But then all of a sudden you say, well, maybe some of those things that you thought were real or you've been told are real are really not. And then maybe some of those things are dark and sometimes bad. There have been a lot of bad things that have happened. And so people don't like to hear about that because it really disrupts this perfect model we have of, the American dream and all, being heroes around the world and all these things. And so we have to be open-minded and objective no matter what, because really, if we think about it, no matter who's listening right now, from anywhere in the world, we're all just people of Earth. And at the end, these national boundaries and all these things we're fighting over, it really doesn't matter. So we just need to look at consciousness as this global thing around the world and just accept facts and evidence for what they are and not have any bias against them. Huge drastic change on the planet where people are moving away from organized religion at a very quick rate in some places, and they're discovering that there's this whole other side to understanding, the past and also who we are. And when we look right now at where we're going with all of this technology and how influencing us and how we're specifically traveling along our timeline, I see much of this technology is not just some invention of some guy in his basement. I really don't think that a lot of the inventions that we have on Earth are simply just some person that thinks of something that's never been done. I really think that a lot of things are given. And I think that a lot of things are timed in a certain way. For when, like the Internet, that came at a certain time and it changed the whole world. And a lot of these technologies are really changing us. Some are changing us for the better, and some are changing us for the worse. I'm very disturbed at how obsessed a lot of the younger generation is becoming on their phones, and they're no longer really absorbing and even seeing the world around them. So we got to be careful where we're going with technology, because it could end up being our downfall in the end. Someone who doesn't read ever really doesn't know a lot about ancient history, but they know how to use a computer and how to use the Internet, they can access some incredible things that most would maybe never been able to do in history, and yet what are we doing? We're not, right? We're choosing to look at a lot of these silly things that I consider just to be distractions. Sumerian king list, it says that kingship was lowered from heaven again. These laws and this governing structure for our world, it was again lowered after the flood. It shows you that there was essentially a complete reset because they had to start civilizations over again. in the Mesopotamian area, and then, of course, it spread across the world after that. That just shows us we had this complete reset button on us understanding all of this stuff that preceded us. There have been a lot of really great authors who have come forth, like Graham Hancock and Randall Carlson, who are trying to show this geologic evidence, and they're saying, look at, places like the Columbia Gorge of Washington or out in Montana, which was just south of where the ice caps were. Look at these massive geologic formations that occurred from water flowing quickly across the land, tearing apart mountains and creating these massive riffles. That's evidence right there that's pointing towards the fact that these events were so dramatic that they literally washed away a lot of what was there before. And all we're left with are just fragments and pieces to put together. And it's become a war on information to see what information we're going to take in and what we're going to consider not real. One of the things that I believe has really held us back, I've taken the term Plato's cave, which is this idea that we're kept looking at a wall of basically shadows, keeping us in fear and illusion of a lot of information and distracted. I actually call it Darwin's cave, because the whole Darwinian theory of everything simply coming from these eukaryotes and prokaryotes in these pools of sludge that eventually some small little fish or land animal eventually will turn into a massive mammoth or a tiger or a human, that's just not true. There's so much that we've been misled about, and the fact that we're already seeing what we consider to be alien microbes and alien water, right, from comets and things that have come that we call panspermia from the universe and the galaxy around us. And so the first thing to consider is the fact that there are billions of habitable worlds in the universe, literally billions of Earth-like worlds, and we need to get past the fact that we are not alone. There's life all over the universe, and the fact is that we are not ready to meet our galactic neighbors because we're still fighting and working through what's considered our lower state, our lower chakra state of our evolution, which is we're still in this war mentality, materialism, where we haven't gotten over the fact that to see the higher picture and to move to the next level. And until we can do that, we're going to be kept in the dark about what really is out there. And how that connects to evolution is that Darwin himself, and if you read what he wrote in his theories, he specifically stated when he was in the Galapagos that one of the things, the reasons he went there was to try to prove that those, the finches and a lot of them were from this distinct, evolutionary track. Whereas, really, if we look at all over the world, these locations that have all these unique species, it's like a DNA library. It's not an evolutionary library; it's a DNA library of specific zones. And what Darwin said is, he found so many faults in his theories on evolution that he thought it was like a placeholder for science, meaning he suspected when other theories would come out in the future, they would disprove him. He actually came out and said that. And what happened is the church jumped all over Darwinism because it was a really easy way to go along with the whole, I call it the illusion of what our reality has become, on how, we're some kind of, there was like this big God figure in the clouds that put us here, and we're all just these kids trying to figure things out on our own, and there's no one influencing us. And that's not the way it is at all. It's actually the complete opposite. We're these important beings here who have this history that's completely misunderstood and hidden, because it would get to the truth of who we really are, almost separating us from the animal kingdom, showing us that we're actually stewards of the earth and not just to destroy it. Like Shakespeare said, it's like we're all characters in this play. We're all there's actors, and we're all playing our roles, and that's really, to me, it gets far beyond just talking about the simplicity of what some people might think it does, and the fact that the Earth is far more important than just being one planet that has life among potentially billions. This is a very important place. We have a planet where there are millions of species of every kind of life you can imagine, and we completely take it for granted. We run over it with cars, and we drive right past it and ignore it most of the time, whereas we're basically living in this incredible ecological world where there's life all over the place, and we really take that for granted. So I consider it the stage of time, because the Earth is this stage where it's playing out the timeline of all the different dimensions, but because it's the third dimension, it's where the main stage is being played out. So if you think of, if there are higher dimensions and there are lower dimensions, and Earth in our reality is mostly based on the third dimension, then that's why I perceive it as basically being the stage, because so much is being played out here on Earth. And it's very important where not only where the Earth ends up, but where we end up in our future. And that's why I'm basically talking about how our timeline has been very much a controlled timeline, which is being fought over to end up in one direction or another. And I really believe, based on everything we've seen, that these beings that are known as the Anunnaki, which mentions them specifically by name in many, many places, they're just named that because of this ruler Anu. And if you look into all the symbolism of the importance of Anu, that's why they're named that name. You know, they came here to essentially set up their model of kingship that they had wherever they came from here. And that's all we are. We're like a colony. We're basically, when you think of when Columbus came over and, you know, wrecked Columbus and Pizarro and Cortez, kind of destroyed all the Native American civilizations in the Central and North America and South America. I mean, we're just like a colony that's been pushed in a certain direction based on our rulers. All these illusions that have held back are going to burst wide open, and it's going to be kind of like the puppet master comes back from behind the curtain and is like, "Hey, I've been here all along. I'm sorry. I hope you're not mad at me." If we look at what Pisces was, it was what's considered a negative polarity, which means Enlil was allowed to reign, and his mentality and negative and dark ways were allowed to essentially rule our timeline for thousands of years. And that's why things have gone the way they have. Except we're entering the time of Aquarius by the year 2027. So we're right at the threshold right now of this changeover period, where what happens when empires collapse? Well, they basically just accumulate as much as they can before things go down, and they try to start as much war as they can, and that's what we're seeing with all these attempts to try to start World War III and to try to create all this propaganda, which, by the way, it is propaganda. We have to get past so much of what is being said to try to fuel war on this planet, and to see the bigger picture and understand that we're just simply looking at a dying empire that's just grasping at straws right now.